Part 5. That Day at Oglala, June 26, 1975. When a white man is killed, even if he brought it on himself, all Indians are guilty. Isn't that the way it's always been? Chapter 27. June 26, 1975 started out as a beautiful early summer day. The air sweet and heavy after an especially violent overnight thunderstorm that all but blew our tents away. The downpour had kept us up late, and I had slept in our makeshift tent city, as I called it, until after 11 a.m. I felt a warming breeze as I lay there perspiring on top of my sleeping bag in my tent, listening to the women laughing and gossiping outside as they prepared breakfast on the open campfire. I heard one of them say, "Oops, I just dropped a pancake on the ground. It's all muddy." And another answered, "Oh, don't worry about it. Just wipe it off. They'll never know the difference." She meant us menfolk. I laughed quietly with them. They were right. We'd never notice. I could smell the wonderful smell of those pancakes, and I was already envisioning the thick syrup I'd soon be trickling over them, followed by several cups of scalding hot black coffee. But suddenly, this beautiful and peaceful morning was cut short by the staccato sound of gunfire. It seemed far off, and at first I dismissed it as someone practicing in the woods. Then I started hearing the screams. My heart nearly leapt out of my chest. Our spiritual camp had abruptly become a war zone. I instantly thought of all the women, children, and old people there at our tent camp, and of our elderly hosts, Harry and Cecilia Jumping Bull at their house up the hill. This was why they called us here, to save their lives. I pulled on my boots, grabbed my shirt and rifle, and rushed out of the tent. I started running for the house where the Jumping Bulls lived. The heat of the day hit me like a fist, and as I ran, trying to wipe the sweat from my eyes, I dropped my ammo bag. Bullets were zooming from every direction. I could hear them flying past my head, just inches away. No way of telling who was firing at whom. I had to drop onto my belly and crawl, keeping to the woods for cover, then hunkering low behind an old cattle fence. I finally made it to the Jumping Bull house and, to my relief, found that Grandma and Grandpa Jumping Bull weren't there. Thankfully, it turned out they'd left the property at dawn and gone to a steer auction in Nebraska. I ran over to the little shack next door, where I heard children's voices wailing out in fright. Bullets snapped at my heels as I ran, barely missing me, just the way you see it happen in the movies. I realized I was drawing fire to the shack. If I tried to rescue the kids right then, I would only endanger them more. How to get them out of there? I couldn't even tell which direction the shooting was coming from. I called out to the young ones that it was time to be brave, time to be warriors. "Get under your bed! Stay there until we come get you!" I shouted. Then I made a beeline out of there to draw the gunfire away from the house and the kids inside it. I took temporary cover by a stand of trees nearby and tried to figure out what in hell was going on. 2 cars, those shiny ones that always meant trouble for Indians, were parked askew from each other in a field out toward the road, maybe 150 yards away. That's where the first shots I'd heard had been coming from. But now there was the sound of gunshots coming from all over. Behind me, ahead of me, seemingly from every direction. Were we surrounded and about to be slaughtered? I fired off a few shots above their heads, trying not to hit anything or anyone, just to show that we had some kind of defense so they didn't roll in and slaughter us. A few other brothers were doing the same with the rifles we had. Like me, they fired their rifles, mostly 22s and 30-30 deer rifles, every so often from a distance at those 2 unknown and unannounced interlopers who had come roaring onto the Jumping Bull property without warning. We were just trying to buy time, maybe scare them off, at least hold them back for a time. Remember, there was a near civil war on the reservation at the time. Goons had been terrorizing the reservation for months, with drive-by shootings, beatings, outright murders, burnings of elders and AIM supporters' houses going on almost every day. That's precisely why the Lakota elders had called us in, to defend them against the assaults of the goons who served as the FBI's, the BIA's, and the Tribal Council's paramilitary hit squad. They were the ones with the latest high-powered military weaponry, not us. After a while, when we realized that the drivers of the 2 shiny cars were apparently already dead, slouched beside their vehicles in pools of blood, and that they weren't goons, but FBI men. We could only look at each other in shocked disbelief. We each knew what that stunned, vacant look in the other's eyes meant. If those agents were dead, we, those of us Indians at the Jumping Bull property that day, whether man, woman, or child, were as good as dead too. Even if they'd only been injured, we were goners. We knew we wouldn't be taken alive if we tried to surrender. Only a few minutes before, I'd been lazing in my tent, yawning and smiling and stretching, looking forward to a nice plate of hot pancakes smothered in syrup. Now I was a dead man. I'm telling you here only what I personally saw and experienced and felt at the time. One man's very limited perceptions of a scene of near total chaos. Not how it was all described in infinite, gory, and often fabricated detail by the FBI and the government prosecutors afterward. Since you can never believe anything the government says, it's impossible to trust a single piece of their evidence. They have fabricated bullet casings, firing mechanisms, whole rifles, anything to pin this murder on me, even though they themselves later admitted in appeals court in 1985 that they had no idea who killed the agents. I didn't see their agents die, had no hand in it, would have done anything to stop it had I only known in time. But at that point, there was nothing I or anyone else could do about it. It was done. There were dozens, maybe hundreds of FBI, local lawmen, goons, and white vigilantes out there, suddenly appearing within minutes as if from out of nowhere, and they were all gunning for us. And two of their buddies lay injured, probably dead, in the crossfire zone between us. No, we weren't likely to be gently handled by them if we surrendered. Bigfoot's people had surrendered, remember? Even the elders, women, and children would be shot, as they had done with such relish at Wounded Knee 1 in 1890, on even less provocation. I felt absolutely certain that our own fate would be the same. They would hunt us down through the creek beds and gullies, every man and woman, every elder and child, and shoot each one of us as they'd done back then in 1890. After all, their buddies were dead, and we were Indians. When a white man is killed, even if he brought it on himself, all Indians are guilty. Isn't that the way it's always been? Other residents of the Jumping Bull compound, mostly women and children, were desperately trying to find a safe spot to take cover. I warned everyone that we had to get out of the area, that they would kill us all if we didn't move quickly, and I tried to figure out some way, some route, to lead them out and away. It seemed impossible. We needed a miracle. Somewhere in the distance, above the rapid staccato of gunfire, I could hear the drone of a small spotter plane that was circling high above us. I still couldn't believe that our wonderful, peaceful morning could have been shattered by such insane and murderous violence. I didn't know then why we had come under such a vicious attack. I knew only that my job, my personal duty before all else, was to help protect these innocent women and terrified children. I knew I couldn't give in to my own fear, and I worried that someone else's panic could spell all of our deaths. As documents released 20 years later, in 1995 through the Freedom of Information Act, confirmed, a virtual army, lawmen, goons, SWAT teams, vigilantes, BIA police, you name it, had been gathering in the area for a planned paramilitary assault on the Pine Ridge Reservation. And now, the day had finally come. This raid had obviously been pre-planned. Maybe they figured they could come in and finish us off after the two agents had drawn our fire, giving them the excuse they needed. There seemed absolutely no way out of there for us. And yet, despite being surrounded by hundreds of lawmen, every one of our group was able to make it out of the death zone. Except poor, young, frightened Joe Kills-Right Stunts. A 21-year-old dedicated aimster, shot in the forehead by a bullet from an unknown assailant's gun. Some say a sniper, some say an assassin. Only his killers would know, and they've never been investigated. Since the government holds and withholds as it sees fit all evidence, it's impossible to be certain what really happened. Joe had taken up a rear guard position to defend the rest of us while we began our escape. We gave him the Indian name Killsright at a posthumous ceremony we held for him. I'm glad he got it. I know he takes comfort in it. That's the sacred name he's known by now, in the sky world. Hey, Killsright. Keep the campfire going and the coffee hot till I get there. I won't be long. That day, in the midst of hundreds of enraged pursuers, a terrified band of a few dozen men, women, children, and elders were somehow rendered invisible. I credit that to Crow Dog's revival of the ghost dance. For that specific occasion, the creator, Wakantanka, loaned each of us an invisible ghost shirt, impervious to white man's bullets. I don't know why Joe Killsright Stunts didn't get his in time. Maybe he was just reaching out his hand for it when he was gunned down. I'd gladly have given him mine, if only I'd known. And so the great mystery took Joe, and led the rest of us out of there that afternoon. Although we could feel the wind of the bullets as they whistled right past our ears, not a one hit its target. There were roadblocks and roving SWAT teams everywhere. How to escape with this terrified little group from the swiftly tightening dragnet of crazed lawmen all around us? Many of the group were approaching panic, paralyzed by fear, and I remember saying as I led them into a gully, "A prayer! We need a prayer!" And then we all squatted down on the muddy ground, and even though I'm not used to leading others in prayer, I heard myself start to pray. I heard my own voice praying out loud as if from a great distance, saying something like, "Tonkashila, Grandfather, Great Spirit, we hope you'll get us out of here alive today. We know you'll show us how to escape if you want us to go on living, and if you don't, if this is the day you've decided to call us home to you, we accept that. We don't seem to belong in this world anyway. So we say hello to you, Grandfather. Either way, whatever Wakantanka wants to happen will happen. Either we escape, or we go to Skyworld and live with Grandfather. Both are good. Aho!" This seemed to give everyone new hope, a new strength and courage, and I was beginning to grasp the real power of prayer. I even felt a new strength, a new confidence within myself, and just then, after the prayer, as we tried to figure out which way to run, an eagle flew into a big tree nearby and screamed that high-pitched, ear-piercing scream they make, like the sacred eagle bone whistle used at ceremonies. Then it flew off, swooping directly over our heads above the brush-filled ravines where we were hiding. It was as if it had come to show us the way. I believe it did, and so did every one of us there. I believe it to this day. We followed the direction of its flight, and that eagle led us safely away despite the swarms of searching lawmen and goons. We discovered directly beneath where the eagle had led us a large drain pipe going under the road. We crawled through it in terrifying darkness on our hands and knees, men, women, and children, finally coming out into a cow pasture well away from the dragnet surrounding the Jumping Bull property. Then we heard shots nearby, and realizing that they'd spotted us, we all ran like hell, bullets literally whizzing past our ears, and we ran uphill toward the open hill country and pine bluffs nearby, zigging and zagging our way first east, then south, then east again, praying desperately that if we just kept moving, we could somehow get away. That the whole group of us, other than Joe Killsright Stunts, made it out of there alive that day was the real miracle of miracles. Still incomprehensible to me. There was no way we could have escaped, and yet we did. I heard later that they had search units combing the area for us, but we never heard more than a distant small plane. That holy eagle did more than show us the direction to go that day. He opened his wings wide and took us under his protection. He rendered us invisible and flew us to safety. We were and are enormously thankful to the many, many people who helped us stay hidden during that terrible and terrifying time, at great risk to their own lives, arranging temporary structures for us night after night. Later we learned that Indian people from all over had gathered at the police roadblocks and cheered us on, blaring their car horns when we escaped. Shots were fired at random, confusing our pursuers as to our location. Friends we didn't even know we had put their own lives on the line and spirited us underground, keeping us hidden from the encircling dragnet. Night after night, we kept moving, following creek beds, gullies, whatever. We conferred with our elders about what we should do, and it was decided that we would stay hidden in the area until that year's Sundance in early August at Crow Dogs, where we would personally thank Wakantanka, the Great Spirit, the Great Mystery, who had come to us that day in the shape of an eagle, miraculously guiding our escape and saving our lives. Meanwhile, the FBI and goons and BIA police seemed to go berserk in what's been called the biggest manhunt in modern U.S. history. A reprisal that terrified the entire population of the Pine Ridge Reservation in a Vietnam-style search-and-destroy operation. They tore up the homes of traditional Indian people without search warrants. They threw people around violently, including women and old people, and harassed and intimidated anyone believed to be even remotely an AIM supporter, which, of course, meant nearly all of the Pine Ridge Reservation's traditionals. Seeking continual guidance from the elders, we hid out with various friends, but one by one, most of the members of our group were caught and arrested. I finally decided to try to make it across the border to Canada, hoping to find refuge with my native brethren in the far northwest, possibly even seek political asylum there. I figured the chance of getting my fair trial in the U.S., or even staying alive there, was now all but non-existent. We learned that the FBI's were so infuriated at the deaths of their two buddies, as well as by our subsequent miraculous escape from their tightening dragnet, that they vented their rage by firing a bullet at close range into nearly all of the Jumping Bulls family's photo portraits hanging on the parlor walls. Some in the head, some in the heart. I've not the slightest doubt that they would have done precisely the same thing to each and every one of us had we not followed the eagle out of there that day. In escaping to Canada, I was following in the footsteps of none less than the Great Sitting Bull, the Hunkpapa Lakota medicine man who, following the Battle of Little Bighorn on June 25, 1876, had fled across the border with his people after ending General George Armstrong Custer's proud career as a killer of innocent Indian men, women, and children. Oddly, for those interested in numbers, the firefight at the Jumping Bulls on June 26, 1975 occurred exactly 99 years and a day after the Battle of Little Bighorn, or the Greasy Glass as we call it. Sitting Bull knew that the white man's vengeance would be swift and merciless. Like me, even if he hadn't personally killed Custer or anyone else, he was still what they'd call today an aider and abettor. All Indians, after all, are aiders and abettors when they stand up to defend their people from slaughter. Sitting Bull had no illusions about what had happened, or what was going to happen. He said, "What treaty that the whites have kept has the red man broken? Not one. What treaty that the whites have ever made with us red men have they kept? Not one. When I was a boy, the Sioux owned the world. The sun rose and set on our lands. We sent 10,000 horsemen into battle. Where are the warriors today? Who slew them? Where are our lands? Who owns them? What white man can say I ever stole his land for a penny of his money? And yet they say I am a thief? Is it wrong for me to love my own? Is it wicked of me because my skin is red? Because I am a Sioux? Because I was born where my fathers lived? Because I would die for my people and my country?"